Okay, guys, today we are going to see The Deadliest War You Never Heard of by History Abridged with Jack Racon. Let's see, what's the deadliest war that I never heard of? Okay,
This video is brought to you by the trip I'm hosting to Germany
okay, let's increase the volume.
and Austria in September. I'm really excited, so I have too many things to say
I
about
already
it, so I
traveled
put them at
to
the end.
Austria.
Enjoy. World War II was not a good time, yeah? No other war in
What do you mean? World War II made the best video games ever. The greatest generation.
human history has killed as many people, and God willing and the creek don't rise, no other war ever will, because if it does, there's gonna be nukes, and then nobody's having a good...
There was like a phrase that somebody told me that I don't know how World War III will be fought, but I am sure that World War IV is going to be fought with sticks and stones. Kind of grim, right?
good time. But if you were living through World War II, what were the odds that you would still be alive in 1945?
Pretty high, actually. If you think about even at the D-Day invasion, they had like less than 5% death. If I'm not wrong. Tell me if I'm wrong, chat.
Depends a lot on where you live. If you were an American citizen, you were chilling. Counting civilians and soldiers together, your odds of dying in the war were just under 1/3 of
Oh my god, that's so low.
If you were British, about 1%. France, 1.5%. Japan, 4%.
Wow.
Germany, 8%. Russia, nearly 14%.
But USSR was like literally just dumping people onto the Nazis.
And if you were unlucky...
Ah, comrade, we have a hole here. Don't worry, comrade. We have bodies to fill that hole. Go there, comrades.
lucky enough to be Polish, God help you. Your odds of dying in the war were nearly 1 in 5.
Holy
Those
crap.
are staggering numbers, but other wars had countries whose survival rates were much worse. World War I was one of them. If you were Serbian, your odds of dying could have been as high as 1 in 4.
Jesus
when you
Christ.
reach this point, so many people are dead, it's hard to even measure. Bronze and silver medals both go to China, who managed to kill around 1 in 3 of its people twice before the invention of gunpowder. But even that is chump change
Jesus Christ.
compared to the #1 spot, who lost about 60%. If you were alive in this country at the start of the war, and you did not find a way to get out by the end, you were twice as likely to be dead as alive. That's not soldiers, that's everybody. Women, children, the elderly, everybody. And it
Is it talking about the Paraguay, the war on Paraguay, that Brazil and Argentina and Uruguay fought?
happened in just 6 years, and that country was Paraguay.
Yeah.
When was the last time you thought about Paraguay? I mean,
Pretty much always, because I live in Brazil and we are neighbors of Paraguay, and there you can buy a bunch of stuff for cheap because they have a horrible piracy problem.
Frankly, that's impressive. In World War II, Germany was actively trying to raise their own death count, and they only came away with 8%. How did Paraguay manage to do 7 times that? It all starts with our good friend colonialism. Roll clip.
1494. Spain and Portugal are both really into this new business of sailing the seas and owning everything you touch, but they have a problem.
They are trying to make everything they touch theirs, so they make the Tratado de Tordesillas. I don't know how to say this in English. He's probably going to say
What
it.
if the other country sails the seas and touches the stuff that they own? that would be bad. So they cut the world in half. Spain owns this half of the earth, and Portugal owns this half of the earth.
Tordesillas.
The border that divided Portugal and Spain was a straight line through South America. A straight line is kind of a crap border, so they tried fixing the border with a treaty. And then another treaty, and another treaty.
Actually, Portugal used different maps. What we learned in class is that Portugal used different maps, and it was slowly adjusting the map to get more and more territory that was from Spain, because they said, oh no, the line crosses here, but like the south of Brazil, they just squish it to be on their side. So they said, oh no, the line is here, but actually the line would go and just do a little belly if you actually see it. And Spain was very mad about that.
Many treaties over many centuries, and by the time South America gets independence, the border problem still isn't solved. Now, instead of Spain and Portugal, it's Argentina and Brazil fighting, and they're mostly fighting over Paraguay. Paraguay, in response, made like a porcupine and funded the single largest army in South America. Even so, the president of Paraguay ruled with a simple creed: always by the pen, never by the sword. Unfortunately, he died in 1862 and gave Paraguay to his son. What about guns, Papa? What about guns? That son was Francisco Solano Lopez, and he was kind of like a Nepo baby Napoleon. He spent his gap year as an envoy.
We learned that he is a dictator, and he was a dictator. He did a bunch of crimes during this war.
To France, got really into military history and brought home a bunch of changes to Frenchify the Paraguayan army, as well as a lot of guns. And as soon as he became president, he found a use for those guns. Paraguay had only one friend, and that was Uruguay. Or at least it was. Mr. President, the Brazilians invaded Uruguay. My Uruguay? No, they invaded his Uruguay and made it their friend's Uruguay instead, and our Uruguay might be next! Without support from Uruguay, Paraguay would be all alone, and so Lopez declared...
Well, we learned that actually Brazil was in a conflict with Uruguay, but we sent some troops there because they were invading our country, and the main problem that Paraguay had with Brazil, Argentina, and Uruguay was there was no exit to the sea. So what Lopez thought, oh, Argentina doesn't like Brazil, Uruguay doesn't like Brazil. If I attack Brazil, both of them are going to become my friends and attack Brazil, and we are going to win, and Paraguay is going to have a way out to the sea, a sea passage. But no, when he attacked Brazil, Argentina and Uruguay just got with us because we were the biggest country with the biggest population and the biggest army, the strongest army. We did most of the job in that war.
War on Brazil. So listen. As far as wars go, this was not a crazy war. I mean, I wouldn't want to die for this war, but there was a clear, limited objective. Get in, defend Uruguay's government, get the Brazilians out, and then leave. And while Brazil had a lot more people than Paraguay, Lopez was packing a pretty big army. In mere weeks, Lopez tore through over 100 miles of Brazilian territory. Unfortunately, he went the wrong way. Uruguay.
Yeah, he invaded the Pantanal, our region of Pantanal.
Was south of Paraguay, but Lopez knew a shortcut. Hey, Argentina, you won't even know I'm here. No. Then you have fallen right into my trap. Declaring war on Argentina was a little risky, but not completely dumb. Argentina just had a civil war, and Lopez was friends with the losers.
But he united both of them, because both of them, they don't like each other, but they don't like that another person is using their country to pass troops to attack the bigger country.
This was just the distraction the rebels needed to rise up, and then Argentina would be so busy fighting itself it wouldn't even notice Lopez marching through, in theory. In reality, Lopez single-handedly restored unity to Argentina as both sides worked together in harmony to kick him out of the country. Oh well, that's what the guns were for. Lopez tore across Argentina in a bloody campaign to rescue Uruguay's government. They had already surrendered.
Yeah.
Lopez was still stuck in Argentina, and Brazil had already installed a new government in Uruguay. Game over. But
Yeah, then back in the past, we actually Uruguay was part of Brazil in a region called Cisplatina.
Lopez was in too deep. Uruguay is only the battle. We will win the war. Lopez went to war with Uruguay too. But if Napoleon could fight all of Europe, Lopez could fight half of South America.
Yeah, but
I don't
most
think
of the
anyone ever told
population-
him that Napoleon lost. Whether or not Lopez could win the war was really going to come down to one thing: rivers. You're not getting an army through this, or this, or this. If you want in or out of Paraguay, you are taking the river. To get control of the river, Lopez settled on a simple stealth mission: sneak in under the cover of night and hijack the Brazilian ships while they slept. Odds of survival if we just start shooting? Crunching the numbers, 32.33%. Repeating, of course. Light her up.
Oh god.
The Paraguayans opened fire, waking up all of the Brazilians. A few hours later, Paraguay's navy was in the river, and the Allies' counteroffensive was underway. Now, the Allies don't actually want to conquer all of Paraguay. Well, Argentina does, but Brazil won't let them. What they want is to get rid of Lopez. And
Yeah, because it's much more interesting to leave Paraguay there as a buffer state to support you, because Brazil is too big. We have a bunch of problems. There's a bunch of revolutions in our country. Were a bunch of revolutions in our country. The south of Brazil actually separated for a time. São Paulo tried to separate the movement MMDC. That it's the name we call that because it's the name of the only 4 youngsters that died in the brief conflict.
by this point,
It's such a cool story actually. We have our university, public university, USP, UPS, USP, and there our engineering graduates picked train rails and turned them into cannons. It's such an awesome story because the Brazilian government actually knew that São Paulo would try to get independent, so they took all the guns from our military outposts here in São Paulo out of São Paulo, so we couldn't just go and steal a bunch of guns like other revolutions of Brazil did in the past.
probably settle those border disputes. But Lopez tells his army that Paraguay's very survival hinges on him
Oh my god, it's a Homelander.
keeping his job. And sure, he may have lost the Navy, but the Navy is just the battle. All
They
they
will
had to
win
do
the
was
war.
launch a counter-offensive, because offense means you're winning.
Exactly.
This
That's just like the Battle of the Bulge.
is the part where everybody starts dying. The Paraguayan army charged headlong into the largest battle ever fought in South America and lost.
Yeah.
The dead Paraguayans were too many to bury. They were heaped into piles to be burned, and some were so skin and bones already that they wouldn't light. The survivors had fled in so many different directions, it took days for Lopez to find them all. But what's most amazing to me is that no matter how many casualties they took, Paraguay never seriously pushed back. Seemingly every man, woman, and child in Paraguay was willing to follow this man to hell and back.
Well, he was executing people. He was also executing people that didn't want to fight in this war.
If they even came back. And Lopez needed every man, woman, and child in Paraguay because he was far from giving up. We almost won, and if we double our army, we can almost win again. Lopez swells his ranks with senior citizens and kids, and
Yeah, there's actually a story that our troops, if you, it's a sad story. For Lopez actually drew mustaches on kids, and they attacked Brazilian forces at night. So the Brazilians didn't know who was shooting at them, and there are stories that tell that when the Brazilians won that battle, because there are a bunch of kids, they were horrified because a bunch of kids with mustaches drawn on them were fighting them, and this was one of our fuels to continue the war, because Lopez was a lunatic, a crazy dictator lunatic.
sends them barefoot onto the battlefield. And still nobody seemed to mind? One observer noted how every time a man got blown up by an artillery shell, all his mates would laugh and go, "Ah, good one." Soldiers were whipped to maintain discipline, and yet they were one big happy family. Soldiers called their officers father, and Lopez at the top was Big Papa. Big Papa, credit where it's due, finally sued for peace, and the demands were simple: unconditional surrender. That's a tough pill to swallow. This story would be a lot simpler if every casualty was the fault of Lopez's comedic stubbornness, but Paraguay really could be on the chopping block. But then again, men are being slaughtered on the front lines. Cholera and yellow fever have begun to take hold, and Lopez's men start to wonder if surrender might...
Yeah, one of the most difficult battles in the Paraguay War was the Battle of Carrefour, because it was a fort that Brazil gave to Paraguay, and it was a great fort. the greatest fort. We built the greatest fort between us and Paraguay, and we gave it to them. I don't know why we gave to them, but we gave the fort to them. But yeah, it was one of the hardest battles in the Paraguay
still
War.
be the best option. Lopez seems to think the only reason he's losing is because he's not whipping his men hard enough. He flogs his own...
Oh yeah, because he's not a dictator. He's not hitting and dying. Oh my God.
mother and shoots anyone who wants to surrender.
Yeah.
It wasn't enough. The Allies sacked the capital and looted everything of value. It was over. The war is only the battle! Yeah, no, Lopez still doesn't surrender. I guess at this point he's channeling the
Yeah,
Taliban.
he wanted to make like a guerrilla war, but he couldn't do that because there were nobody left. He killed an entire generation. Almost every single able male body was dead.
More than Napoleon, he runs off into the countryside with a bunch of tweens in loincloths to go stage an insurgency.
Yeah.
Paraguay has officially declared war on Paraguay. The plan, to the extent that there was one, was to starve out the Allies.
He
during
wanted to
their
burn the food.
occupation. So, to clarify, disease was spreading around the country. There were no men left to work the fields because they all got shot. The country was under military occupation, and now the Lord of the Flies over here was going around burning all the food. Lopez wanted to fight until he was the last man in Paraguay. He would have to settle for the last man in his army. The Allies finally caught up to him in 1870. Do you admit defeat? Do you?
And he was
Running away!
My microphone! And he was shot by a Brazilian.
Are you? Would someone take that
He was
sword
just
away?
shot
He's
by
gonna
a
hurt
Brazilian
himself.
normal
I die
soldier.
with my nation! Lopez died as he had lived, continuing to fight until he managed to hurt himself in the process.
Well, actually,
the
he
cost
was
to
shot by a
Paraguay
Brazilian.
was astronomical. Besides losing almost 40%.
I'm right? Wait a second. Okay, Francisco Solano Lopez, leader of Paraguay during the war on Paraguay, was shot and killed by a Brazilian soldier known as Chico Diabólico, Francisco Lacerda. Yeah, in the Cerco de Cora. Yeah, he didn't hurt himself. We killed him. Brazil killed him.
Percent of its territory, at least half the population, and maybe 90% of the adult men were just gone. And yet,
it was amazing. At some point, a Brazilian official did a counting, and there were like seven women to every single man in Paraguay.
Lopez is remembered to this day as a national hero.
Not as much. Not as much. There are some points in Paraguay that see him as that, but not every single point there. Mostly in regions that where Brazil and Paraguay are together, he's seen as a hero, but in the countryside, he's not seen as much.
And I don't know what to think about that. I don't know if this man is the greatest propagandist to ever live, or maybe when war takes everything from you, all you've got left to hold on to is the story. When do you give up fighting for something you believe in? You've just finished watching a 10-minute video on a 19th century war over Paraguay. May I assume you like history? I want to tell you about one of the coolest history experiences.
Well, there's some stuff. Maybe it's how the war in Paraguay is taught on Paraguay, but here in Brazil there are a bunch of different stuff. But yeah, we killed him. He did not kill himself like the video implied, and yeah. So yeah, guys, continuing on.